So welcome to Anatomy and Physiology. Today we're going to be talking about the human brain, and hopefully by the end of this PowerPoint here, you'll look like Marvel's leader, not because you got exposed to gamma radiation, but because you actually learned something. And you'll find out that the more you use your brain, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you can build it and make more connections. Okay, so if we look at the central nervous system, we'll notice that we have the brain and the spinal cord, and you have a peripheral nervous system as well, and those are all the nerves that branch off of the brain and the spinal cord. But we're going to be concentrating on the anatomy and physiology of the central nervous system, particularly the brain. So if we look at a shark brain, a brain such as the shark, we'll notice that, or any animal here, we'll notice that we have a hindbrain, a midbrain, and a forebrain. And with amphibians, a hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain, and you go up further on and you get more complicated brains like a bird or mammals, horses, dogs, they have a bigger forebrain as well. But we're going to find out that as we develop, our hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain start out rather small, just like those brains do. But then as we develop, our forebrain is going to start developing larger, and that's the main part of the brain. That's what most people think about when they talk about the brain, is this forebrain here. So let's go ahead and start talking about those different structures of our brain and our central nervous system. So if we look at our brain, it's divided into specialized regions that may or may not interact with each other to produce a specific function. And those interactions are what's sending those signals all throughout your body. You're receiving sensory information, doing everything. You're sitting in your chair, you're feeling the heater on, or you're maybe cold. Those are all sensations. You're hearing me, you're interpreting what I'm saying, you're putting that to memory. That's all sensations, and that's all going up into that brain through those electrical signals. So we start looking at the structures of the brain. We're going to start with probably the most important part of the brain, because without this, survival basically can't happen. This is called the brainstem, and it's comprised of three different parts: the medulla oblongata, the pons, and then that midbrain there. This is the hindbrain, midbrain, and then this all is our forebrain here. So if we look at the brainstem, if we take that brainstem out, and this is the diencephalon here, which is the thalamus and the hypothalamus, but the brainstem is the medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain here. What do? So as signals are coming up through that brainstem here, it's going to go through the medulla oblongata first, and this is your heart beating, your respiration, blood pressure, digestion, all those basic autonomic processes for you to survive. You don't have to think about those. Those are the involuntary actions to keep you alive. As you travel up, you go up into the pons, and this is that relay center. It's going to relay information to the cerebellum, and it's also with our sleep. It also helps us with our sleep, our REM cycle. And then finally that midbrain. If we go back here, that midbrain right there, that small spot right there. So if we look at the midbrain, this is our visual reflexes and our eye movements and our reflexes. So if I were to throw a ball at someone, their eyes are going to focus in on that ball as it moves, and they're going to be able to catch it. So that's the brainstem, the medulla, the pons, and the midbrain. If we go up above that brainstem there, we're going to get to that diencephalon there, and that holds the thalamus and the hypothalamus there. Sorry about that, I couldn't talk there. That thalamus is right there above that midbrain, and this is that relay center. Think of a router. It's going to be receiving all that sensory input that's coming up through the midbrain into the brain, and that's the router. It's going to receive all that information. It's going to send it to where it needs to go. So it's going to route all that sensory input where it needs to go. And then your hypothalamus right here is just inferior to that thalamus. And that's where your hormone regulation is, heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, hunger, your circadian rhythms. Think of homeostasis. This is where a lot of those homeostatic functions are, the body temperature, the blood pressure, osmoregulation, water regulation, and then just underneath that is that pituitary gland right there, and that's what is going to send out those really important hormones like your growth hormone, follicle stimulating hormone during puberty, ADH, antidiuretic hormone that helps with osmoregulation. That's going to come out of that pituitary gland just off of that hypothalamus. So that's the midbrain, the thalamus, or the diencephalon with the thalamus and the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And next we have that cerebellum. That cerebellum is this big green spot right here on the base of the skull, in the back of the skull. So what does it do? Well, it's for nonverbal learning and memory. It's balance and muscle memory. If you're an athlete, you remember plays easily because you practice it over and over and over again. If you're a musician, you practice those notes over and over and over again. I can't tell you the last time I rode a bike, but I can guarantee you that if I got on a bike, I could ride it because of that muscle memory. And that's going to help with my voluntary movement as well. And with balance, alcohol can affect the cerebellum rather quickly because the first thing that gets affected with a lot of people is that balance. So that is the cerebellum. So now let's go up to that forebrain, what most people think about when they think about the brain, and that's the forebrain. And that consists of 4 different lobes. This is the largest division of the brain, and is divided into 2 hemispheres, the left and the right, which is also divided into 4 lobes, the frontal, the parietal, the occipital, and the temporal. So if we look at if we took a coronal cut through this brain, we're going to look at, the gray matter. We're going to see gray matter, which is the cerebral cortex, the outermost layer, and then you're going to see that white matter right here, and that's the connecting fibers. That's what that thalamus is going to sit right in here in the brain, and it's going to receive that information, and it's going to route it through this gray matter to the proper place in the brain where it needs to go. If we look at a brain, we notice all of these ridges and these valleys here. And those ridges are called gyri, or gyri, either or. I've heard it pronounced both ways. And then the valleys are the sulci. And basically, the more folds you have, or the more ridges that you have, the more connections that you can make, and the more brain power you can have. And there's ways that you can build those raised ridges by learning new things, by learning how to do different things. Musicians have been able to reform their brain and their frontal lobe by learning a new skill. Okay, so this is a kind of a map of the brain. So we have that frontal lobe here, parietal lobe here, occipital lobe in the back just above the cerebellum, and then the temporal lobe. So let's break it down. And that frontal lobe right here, this is what we're going to start with right here, that frontal lobe. And this plays a very important function in you. This lobe is what makes you, you. Personality, emotions, decision-making, reasoning, organization, speech, singing, creativity. All of this stuff comes from that frontal lobe, and voluntary movement comes from the frontal lobe. So that frontal lobe is very, very important in you being you. So if we look at to the back of that, or posterior to the frontal lobe, we're going to see the parietal lobe right here in green. And this is what plays a role in spatial awareness, self-awareness, the sense of touch, pain, body position, pressure, heat. All this stuff is going to go into the parietal lobe. So this green area here, the blue would be the frontal, the green would be the parietal lobe. These are the different areas or sections of that parietal lobe, but we're not going to talk about that today. The next one is going to be the occipital lobe, just above that cerebellum and at the back side of the skull here. And its primary function is processing visual input. So you see things, and your eyes are going to send those signals. Your nerves are going to send those signals back to the occipital lobe, so you can interpret what you're seeing. And then finally, the final lobe of the brain is the temporal lobe, and this plays an integral role in hearing. The auditory stimulus, you're listening to me right now, so you're interpreting what I'm saying. I'm talking English, so you understand the language that I'm speaking, which is also in the temporal lobe. And this is where your memory is, the memorization of memory. I forgot to mention that the frontal lobe is where memories are formed. A lot of memories are formed because of different personalities and experiences. I couldn't think of the word, but different personalities and different experiences, you form different memories. But your temporal lobe, especially in the hippocampus, is where your memories are stored. So these are where memories are stored, and that's where you can go back and look at your memories and kind of bring them back. So when you're studying for the next anatomy exam, you learned about them in this video or in lecture, and then you are storing them in that hippocampus of the temporal lobe. Okay, so I want you to just look at this structure here, or this is the brain, and just kind of look at the letters and kind of review to yourself what these things are. You can pause the video if you want and kind of quiz yourself, but if you look, so A, right here, B is this raised ridge, C is this valley here, D is this lobe here, G is the parietal, oh, I gave you the answer. G is this back lobe here, F is the this lobe right here, and E is this structure down here. I didn't label anything on this with the brainstem, but if you remember, the brainstem is divided into 3 parts, and you can see 2 of those parts here, the medulla and the pons right here, and the midbrain is kind of on the interior of the brain. But that is kind of a quiz yourself, and there if you see how you did. I really hope that this video helped. So I will be posting this as a review for my class. I hope this has helped anybody else. And until next time, I will see you later.